let's get back to why we're here, and that's to eat. Well, we're not here to eat, but talk about eating. So, the thing I want to really talk about first is what happens when we eat carbohydrates. Because I want us to focus firstly on carbohydrates, because that is probably the thing that alters the way you gain weight the most in your body. Okay? You've all heard of macronutrients. This is basically carbohydrates, proteins, fats. All right, that's macro. Micronutrients is the smaller things. Okay, and that's what's contained within these food groups. All right, so within the carbohydrates, the fats, the proteins, we've got micronutrients, but we're not going to talk about them today. So what I want to talk about today is glucose. And then when you ask me questions like, should I drink milk? You'll be able to answer it yourself when you know this information. Okay. Or should I eat this, or should I drink that? So the way the body works is, let's imagine that we eat our food, okay? And right now, the majority of developed countries, majority of us go through life and we have a large amount of carbohydrates in our diet, correct? Yeah, we eat a lot. And for those of you still unsure about carbohydrates, I'm talking about the sort of more simple carbohydrates, so simple sugars. And that would be things like bread, pasta, rice, all sorts of grains, all the stuff that we bulk our food out with. And yeah, your hands are going into your head. But they're a big part of everyone's lives, okay? So that's the carbohydrate I'm talking about today. Now, the carbohydrate you are going to be eating during this program is you're going to get it from things like vegetables and fruits, okay? So we're not going to take carbohydrate out of our diet. I'm not saying just go away and eat steak. It's not going to happen. And in fact, in this diet, your main intake of food should be through vegetables, okay? That's what you've got to start to change your mindsets to eating. And they do taste good, and you can make them taste good. Okay, so I know probably right now it's just popping up carrot sticks, cucumber, things like that. It's not going to be like that, okay? Don't think of it like that. So we take off food, all right? And today we're going to imagine what most of us eat every day is bread, okay? Bread in our society is huge, okay? It's been around for a little while. Even old cultures, old tribes, most people made some form of bread, okay? The difference with the way we make our bread is we make it very fast, okay? We process it very quickly. Even like the good, grandma's recipe type breads, we make it very, very fast. And what we don't do, we don't process and sort out the grain before we make the bread, okay? If you go back to lots of old cultures, what they would do is spend a lot of time getting the grain ready before they made the bread or whatever came next. All right, we don't tend to do that. We forget to do that. So we just make it quickly. So bread is this starchy carbohydrate, these simple sugars. And what is it good at for the body? What's it good for? Okay, it's got to be good for something or we wouldn't eat it. Anybody? Think about this. Energy, yeah. Bread is a really simple form of sugar. And sugar is what gives us energy, right? So bread, and it's a very cheap source. And that's why if you look at very poor countries or areas of countries where poor people live, really poor, the thing they'll always try and get is some sort of bread or potato. Okay, this is a very cheap form of food that readily turns to glucose. So if you're starving and you've got no money, this is a good idea. It will keep you alive. Okay, it won't give you the quality of life, but it will keep you alive. Okay, so what happens? The bread, when you eat it, becomes glucose, right? And this is basically sugar. So just think about that. So in your blood, you get glucose. It's all really obvious, right? So what happens? How do we get the glucose out of our bloodstream? Because when sugar's in the blood, okay, it's going to start to cause almost like a toxic response, an inflammatory response. So we don't want it floating around our body. It's bad for us. So how do we get the glucose out of the blood? Right, how do we get this energy that's full of nutrients from some foods and some foods not? But how do we get it into our cells? A word I used the other week. Exercise. Close. So we use a hormone. All right, we use a hormone called insulin. Yes, and that's where you've heard insulin. So most people have heard insulin because of the word diabetes, right? So insulin, all it is a hormone. We have lots of hormones that do things in our body. Insulin is just released. It kind of comes up, grabs the glucose, and then it goes to the cells, and it's almost like a key. It unlocks cells. So for today, we'll just say muscle cells, liver, and fat. Okay, so it comes up, it takes this energy source, and it wants to go and put it somewhere, because we need this energy to do what I'm doing right now. So all my muscles, my liver, and my fat, they're the sources that are going to take in. And insulin is the key that basically opens up for it to store. Okay, but the problem is your muscle, so all your muscle and your liver, when they take glucose, they turn it into something called glycogen, and that's the stored version of glucose. They can only store so much. So there's only so much it can take in. All right, there's a limit. So once you get your limit, so maybe I eat 2 slices of toast in the morning. Okay, I've been asleep all night, I wake up, I'm a fairly healthy person, I do lots of exercise. I eat 2 slices of bread in the morning. Okay, forget what's in the bread, but let's just focus on the glucose. It goes, the insulin's released, so insulin comes up, it grabs this glucose, and then it takes it to my muscle, okay, and liver. And there it's stored, okay, and that's what it's stored as, glycogen. So it's stored there. I might use some if I've woken up and I'm a 6 a.m. exerciser. I've used some of this glucose straight away. My brain starts to use glucose as well. You can't function, your brain doesn't function without sugar, without glucose, so we need it. And then I store the rest of it, I put it in my muscle and liver, and we store it, okay? And I've got it there as energy, use it throughout the day, okay? So that's fine. The problem is now, we as Westerners, generally, we tend to take in more bread and more carbohydrates, this sort of carbohydrate, than we need. So what happens? We take in, say we have a snack later, we have another sandwich, or we have some Rivitas, or we have a bowl of cereal, and then we have our lunch, more bread, pasta, blah, 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 okay? So we start to increase, okay, this glucose, it starts to increase, okay? So then we've got the problem again, we've got the glucose in the blood. And what does the body not want in the blood? Glucose. So what's released to get rid of the glucose? Insulin. So the insulin comes up, takes the glucose, but this time, because we've gone to work and we sit in an office all day, we haven't really used up our stored glycogen, okay, and we haven't done any intense exercise, so what do we start to do? We got a problem. So now the body's only way of dealing with this is to say, right, okay, we can't, it's not going to go there, okay, that road's dead, so we've got to get it somewhere else. So it goes to the liver, and the liver thinks, whoa, I'm going to have to put it into something called a triglyceride, which is another way of storing energy. But this energy is stored in fat cells. Okay, so now you're seeing how sugar, glucose, becomes fat. All right? And think about this. So every day this is happening, and our diets are heavily carbohydrate. Okay? Every day this is happening, and most likely the majority of people aren't doing intense exercise to clear a little bit of blood glucose. So what's happening, we're starting to store it in fat. All right? Now the problem here is that if this blood glucose continues to spike through our diet, and we continue to release insulin, and we don't empty these stores very well, okay? When the insulin's in our body naturally says, don't burn the body fat, okay? If you go back 100,000 years, and you were able to take a man from 100,000 years ago and put him in a lab, he is very able to burn fat stores, okay? Because his diet was very low in this kind of high glucose carbohydrate, okay? What we're not very good at anymore is burning these fat stores as energy, okay? Because we always have insulin being released into our blood. So our body's constantly saying no. All right, so that's why we've got body fat. And the problem is we can't burn this body fat, even when we're in there doing loads of exercise, because we're constantly putting in more sugar. Come in. Come in.
I can't get it.
You can. Oh, yeah, we locked you out. Okay, and that concludes today. See you later. No, we haven't finished. You can sit at the back if you want. Yeah, anyway, I can't see you. Okay, I won't go through this again because I'm not boring them again. Just bear with me. So we've got fat, okay? We've got sugar in our blood, and to get rid of it, we're producing insulin. When we've got insulin being released, we can't burn the fat. So can you see what's happening? We've got this big problem, okay? So now, the other problem is over time, what happens is these receptors on your cell that basically receive the message from insulin open up. They start to constantly get bombarded with this insulin. They say, no, 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 we're full, we're full, we're full. And you end up becoming very insulin resistant. Okay, and this is when you start to hear about type 2 diabetes. All right? Type 1 and type 2 are very different. Type 1 is a genetic problem. Okay, type 2 diabetes is not a disease. It's just a condition brought on by a bad choice. All right, it's something very reversible. So now you've got this problem of insulin resistance. Okay, now the body, what it does, it starts to try and balance out. It's constantly trying to get back into homeostasis, constantly trying to be balanced. So what it tells the fat receptors to do is become more sensitive. So it tells your fat cells, look, just take in more and more and more. We've got to clean up. So your fat cells, they start to get bigger and bigger and bigger.